That night, for the first time, I glimpsed through the curtain and saw the dozen or so men standing outside. With the trees around my house, it was too dark to see their faces, but some of them looked frail and thin, others bigger. They all looked pale and exhausted. I watched from upstairs as the figures walked around the house. They went and pressed their faces against the windows. They tried to open doors. They tried to scale the walls, but each time they fell on the ground and struggled like tortoises trying to get back on their feet. And when they did, they went right back to the windows. Some of them wore clothes, suits and jeans alike. Others didn't wear anything at all. No matter if with or without clothes, they all seemed to be constantly aroused. They all constantly pleasured themselves. I watched as they, every 30 minutes, while usually pressing their faces against the windows, they seemed to reach a climax. And just a moment later, they were sneaking around the house again, one passing the other and both staring at the windows and doors and looking for a way to scale the walls. I was terrified, and yet too scared to call the police. I didn't want them to ask how it all happened. I didn't want to tell them that I could be at fault. The first one left at 4:22 a.m. A bird began to sing. The man, one of the stronger ones, suddenly stepped away from the window. He looked around for a moment, and then he ran off. They all left, one after the other, before 5 a.m. Around noon, when I was sure that they were all gone, I grabbed a black bottle and placed it in a plastic bag, and that bag in another bag, and that bag in another, until I wrapped it in its blankets and placed it at the bottom of my wardrobe. I locked all the shutters and the doors twice, and then wedged the doors shut with chairs. Every one of those texts that I got during the day made me jump from my chair. I kept the lights off. I was downstairs at first, but I was too terrified and moved upstairs instead. By 11 p.m., the first one was back. The moans soon began. There were 13 in all. Most of them came from the front, but there were also some that came through the fields at the back. I thought that it would be safer with the shutters locked, but it was worse instead. They knocked and hit against the shutters. One of them kicked against the door, but not with much force. At night, after countless moans and knocks, they left again at 4:30 a.m. The next night, when they came shortly after 11 p.m., they seemed different. They seemed more energetic, more aggressive. There were two of them that never went far from the door. They kicked and banged against it while the others shook the shutter of my living room window, and the others mostly tried to scale the wall. Some of the stronger ones got further, nearly up to my bedroom, but again and again they fell. They all left in the morning, nearly like a group, as if following an invisible command. One after the other, within around 10 minutes, suddenly stopped, raised his head, pulled his pants up, turned around, and ran. I stayed home with my phone off. I ate instant noodles and tried to find the site again, to find where I bought the K-23. But all I got was an error message, 404 not found. The search engine still had it in their cache. The images were gone, but the text was still there. There was a new line at the top, one that hadn't been there when I had ordered. There have been some incidents, the large red letter said. Effects can vary from man to man. Use it sparingly. Below that, in smaller font, was another line. You can't wash it off, but the effect will fade. That night they were back. They came a bit later, but when the first one came, he ran straight against the wall. He didn't even try to climb it. He just ran against it, as if he wanted to break through the stone. The second one looked at the door and punched it. The third one attacked the second. Within 15 minutes, there were 11 men in front of my house, some fighting, the others slamming against the house or clinging to the stones, and slowly crawling up the wall until they slipped or another man pulled on their legs. I had my phone ready to call the police in case they got too close. They never did, though. Something always stopped them short from reaching my bedroom window. They all left at around 3 a.m. Some stumbled off. The last one, who had been beaten to a pulp by two of the others, woke up and crawled away by 3:30 a.m. I heard an ambulance drive by just a few minutes later. There was an article in the newspaper. A man had been found down my street around 4 a.m. The article said he had been badly beaten but survived. The article also said he didn't remember the attack. The next day I sat upstairs, barricaded into my room and staring out the window. The first one came around midnight, the second half an hour later, and the third at 2 a.m. When the first one had already left, they mostly walked around the house, silently and slowly, more like cats than men. A few times they tried to climb, and a few times they pleasured themselves. By 3 a.m. they were all gone again. The next day there was just one man. He walked around the house twice, and then he left. I never touched that bottle again. At some point I moved it from the wardrobe and into the bathroom cabinet. When the men didn't return my calls, I thought about using the K-23 again, but to touch that bottle made me shiver. Every morning I looked at it, and then closed the cabinet door again. At some point, I even stopped thinking about it. Nicole had moved out to the city a few years earlier and left me to keep our parents' house on my own. She only wanted to stay over for the weekend, to see a few old friends and attend a wedding the next day. When she arrived, she went straight for the shower and then, without even bothering with a towel, hushed to her room. I stopped Nicole just before she left the house. "Hey," I said, "please cover yourself when you leave the bathroom." She laughed. "Why? Are there any men here that I should know about?" "No," I said, "not really." "Thought so," she said. "Your perfume is pretty old." "Old?" "Definitely," she said. "It's lost all its smell." She was out the door before I understood what she meant. I called out to her to come back, but she didn't. By the time I had my shoes on, she was already in the taxi. The police told me she was attacked outside the bar, not far from the supermarket. They couldn't explain the attack. They said the man was even with his wife, but the moment she stepped out of the taxi, he ran and pushed her down on the floor and bit her neck. They told me he ripped pieces of flesh from her neck, and then, before a passing bachelorette party could pull him off her, he also bit a piece of flesh out of her arm. They said that there were many men there watching, but that none of them did a thing. They just watched. They even seemed to enjoy it. The police arrested 3 of them for masturbating, right there in the open, right after Nicole had been attacked. I didn't realize it until later, and until the trial was all over the papers, and until this monster pleaded insanity. Only then, with his picture printed in black ink, did I recognize the man. I still had his business card in my purse. Timothy Lang.